The penthouse was silent. He was supposed to be in Tokyo until Tuesday. She had no idea he'd come back early. No idea he was standing in the doorway of his own bedroom, completely frozen, watching something that would rewire every single thing he thought he knew about himself. She didn't hear him come in. She didn't see his jaw tighten or his hand grip the door frame until his knuckles went white. She didn't see the exact moment Choi Tae-yoon, Seoul's most feared mafia boss, lost the war with himself. Welcome to Stories Behind the Billions, besties. Please like, share and subscribe. Laurat had been working in the Choi penthouse for 7 months. 7 months of polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Seoul. 7 months of pressing herself against walls whenever he walked past, of keeping her eyes down, her voice low, her presence small. 7 months of learning the unspoken rules of living inside the orbit of a man like Choi Tae-yoon, a man whose name alone made grown men leave the room. She had learned quickly. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything that isn't assigned to you. Do not look at him too long. Do not wonder about him. Do not ask about the men in black suits who came and went at all hours. Do not flinch when the voices behind the closed office door rose so high the crystal glasses in the kitchen trembled. She had followed every rule. Every single one. Except tonight. Tonight he was gone. His travel bag had left with him 4 days ago, and his personal assistant Minute Jun had confirmed, Tuesday. He would return Tuesday. It was Friday. She had the entire penthouse to herself for 4 more days, and for the first time in 7 months, Laurat had exhaled. She had cooked her own food in his kitchen. She had eaten at his dining table. She had watched television on his sectional sofa with her feet tucked beneath her and a glass of red wine she was absolutely not supposed to open. She had laughed at something on screen, loudly, with no one to hear her. And then, because she was 29 years old and alone and had been suppressing every human need for 7 months inside a sterile palace that smelled like power and expensive cologne, she had gone to her room, retrieved the small velvet pouch she kept hidden at the bottom of her duffel bag, locked her door, or thought she had, and allowed herself to simply be a woman with needs. She had not heard the elevator. She had not heard the soft beep of the penthouse access code. She had not heard his footsteps, quiet as they always were, moving through the dark corridor toward his bedroom to retrieve the documents he had forgotten. Documents he needed for a morning meeting he had flown back early to prepare for. She had not heard any of it. But Choi Tae-yoon had heard her. He had stopped outside his bedroom door, his hand raised to push it open, and heard a sound that turned his entire body to stone. A soft sound. A breathless sound. A sound that reached into his chest and pulled at something he had kept locked behind titanium walls for 38 years. He had pushed the door open without thinking. And then he could not move. Laurat was on his bed. She had not meant to be on his bed. Her own mattress was thin and the springs creaked, and she had told herself it was just for tonight, just this once. She would use the room she cleaned every morning, the room she had always been forbidden from lingering in, the room that smelled overwhelmingly of him even when he was thousands of miles away. She had no idea he was standing in the doorway. Her eyes were closed. Her head was tilted back. Her full lips were parted around a sound she was trying to keep quiet, her curvy body moving with a slow, devastating grace, her thick thighs shifting against his sheets, her hand, and the small device in it, moving in a rhythm that made Tae-yoon's throat close entirely. He stood there for 4 seconds. 4 seconds that lasted the rest of his life. Then her eyes flew open. She saw him. The device hit the mattress. She scrambled upright, yanking the sheets around herself, her chest heaving, her face flooding with a mortification so complete it was almost physical. The sound that came out of her was not a word. It was not a sentence. It was the pure, strangled noise of a woman who wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Mr. Choi, I thought you weren't supposed to be. He had not moved. He was still standing in the doorway, one hand on the frame, his suit jacket half removed, his tie loosened, his dark eyes fixed on her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not anger. Not disgust. Not the cool, unreadable mask he wore for the rest of the world. Something rawer than that. Something that looked, terrifyingly, like hunger. Get out, she whispered. Please. Please just. This is my room, he said quietly. His voice was low. Controlled. But something underneath it was not controlled at all. He stepped back from the doorway. He pulled the door closed behind him. And Laurat sat on his bed in the dark with her heart slamming against her ribs, listening to his footsteps move down the corridor, slow, deliberate, unhurried, and disappear behind his office door. She did not sleep that night. Neither did he. Before we continue, quickly hit the subscribe button, tell us where you're watching from, like, and share with your loved ones. The following morning, Laurat packed her bag. She had her resignation written on a napkin because she had no paper and her hands were shaking too hard to find any. She was going to slide it under his office door and walk out of the penthouse and never come back. She was going to take the humiliation and bury it somewhere deep and get a new job, a different job, maybe in a different city, maybe in a different country. The office door opened before she reached it. Tae-yoon stood in the doorway in a fresh suit, a cup of coffee in his hand, looking at her bag and then at her face with that same unreadable expression. His eyes dropped to the crumpled napkin in her hand. "You are leaving," he said. It was not a question. "Last night was," she stopped. Swallowed. "I'm deeply sorry, Mr. Choi. It was completely inappropriate and I understand if you want me to." "Your salary has been increased," he said. "Effective today." Laurat blinked. What? 30%. Minute-jun will process it this morning." He looked at her bag again. "You may keep your room. The one assigned to you." A pause. "The smallest one. Not mine." He walked past her toward the kitchen. She stood in the corridor with her packed bag and her resignation napkin and her mouth slightly open, completely unable to process what had just happened. By the end of that week, she had unpacked her bag. She told herself it was because she needed the money. She told herself the salary increase was simply guilt money, hush money, the logical response of a powerful man managing a potentially embarrassing situation. She told herself she felt nothing when he started coming home earlier than usual. Nothing when she looked up from mopping the kitchen floor and found him leaning against the counter watching her with his coffee cup. Nothing when he said "Good evening, Laurat" for the first time, not you or a gesture or nothing at all, but her name, in his voice, and something in her stomach went completely quiet. She felt nothing. She was an excellent liar. Hold up for a moment and tell me why you haven't subscribed? Please, kindly hit that subscribe button because this is the only way you can support the hard work we put into creating interesting stories like this for you. Back to the story. A few days later, she was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard voices in the corridor, Tae-yoon's and another man's, louder than usual, edged with something sharp. She kept her head down. She chopped vegetables. She did not listen. But she heard it anyway. "The Busan deal is falling apart," the man said. His name was Director Hwang and he always looked at Laurat like she was furniture. "If we don't send someone by Wednesday." "I will handle it," Tae-yoon said. "You've been handling everything from Seoul lately." A pause waited with meaning. "That's unlike you." Silence. Then footsteps moving away. Laurat kept chopping. She did not look up when Tae-yoon entered the kitchen and sat down at the counter, which he had never done while she was cooking. She could feel him watching her the way you feel sunlight on the back of your neck. "You cook like someone taught you to feed a crowd," he said finally. She glanced up. He was watching her hands. "My grandmother," she said. "She had 8 children." Something moved across his face. "My mother had 1, he said. She cooked like it was a punishment." It was the first thing he had ever told her about himself that wasn't an instruction. Laurat looked back down at her cutting board and tried to remember how to breathe. That evening, she found a new mattress in her room. Thick, expensive, the kind she could sink into. There was no note. There was no explanation. She sat on the edge of it for a long time and told herself it meant nothing. Later that night, she heard him on the phone. His office door was cracked and his voice was very quiet and very cold, and she caught fragments, a name she didn't recognize, a place, a number that sounded like a threat. She had forgotten, in the warmth of kitchen conversations and new mattresses, what he actually was. She remembered now. She pulled her door closed and went to sleep. Drop a comment right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from, besties. We have readers on every continent and we love seeing you in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, this story is just getting started. 3 weeks after the night she would never speak of again, a man named Park Seo-jun arrived at the penthouse. He was one of Tae-yoon's associates, younger, louder, with an easy smile and eyes that had no business being that warm in a man who carried a gun under his jacket. He came for a business dinner that Laurat was instructed to serve, and he spent the entire meal watching her with that smile while Tae-yoon sat across from him discussing numbers that meant nothing to her. "You've been hiding talent up here, Tae-yoon," Park Seo-jun said, and looked directly at Laurat as she refilled his glass. She kept her face neutral. She refilled Tae-yoon's glass without looking at him. "She's staff," Tae-yoon said. His voice was perfectly pleasant. His jaw was a different story. "Beautiful staff." Park Seo-jun smiled at her. "How long have you been here? What's your name?" Laurat, she said. 7 months. 7 months. He leaned back in his chair. Tae-yoon, does she get any time off? I know a restaurant in Gangnam. She is unavailable. The words were quiet. Absolute. Like a door being bolted from the inside. Park Seo-jun raised an eyebrow and looked between them with that smile stretching wider, like a man reading a text between lines. Right, he said slowly. Of course. Laurat excused herself to the kitchen. She stood at the sink with cold water running over her wrists and thought about the way Tae-yoon's voice had sounded when he said she was unavailable. Not possessive the way men usually sounded when they said things like that about staff, dismissive, territorial about property. This had sounded different. This had sounded almost protective. She was reading into things. She needed to stop. When she returned to the dining room, Park Seo-jun was gone and Tae-yoon was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of whiskey, looking out at the city below. He did not turn when she began clearing the table. He will not be invited back, Tae-yoon said. Laurat paused with a plate in each hand. Mr. Choi, that's not necessary. He was just. He will not be invited back, he repeated. Not loudly. Not harshly. Simply as a fact that had already been decided. She carried the plates to the kitchen without another word. By the time she finished washing up, he had gone to bed. She stood at the kitchen window in the dark and watched the lights of Seoul blink below her like scattered stars and felt something she had absolutely no business feeling for a man like Choi Tae-yoon. A few days later, she called her best friend Amora from the balcony while he was in a meeting downstairs. She kept her voice low and told Amora everything. The night on the bed. The salary raise. The new mattress. The unavailable. Amora was silent for a full 5 seconds. Girl, she said. Don't, Laurat said. I'm just saying. Don't. He likes you. He is a mafia boss, Amora. And I am his maid. And he bought you a mattress and basically told a man at his own dinner table to back off of you. Laurat pressed her forehead against the balcony railing and looked down at the 4 to 7 floors between her and the street. This is not a love story, she said. Tell that to the mattress, Amora said. She hung up on her. That evening there was a storm. It came suddenly, the way Seoul storms always did, heavy and without apology, crashing against the penthouse windows with a fury that made the entire building feel small. The power flickered once, twice, and then held. Laurat was in the library, Tae-yoon's library, which she was technically not supposed to use but had been using for months because no one had explicitly forbidden books, when the lights went out completely. The darkness was absolute. The kind that had weight. She sat very still and told herself she was fine. She was 29 years old. She was not afraid of the dark. The lights would come back. They did not come back. She heard his footsteps before she saw him, the beam of a flashlight cutting through the library doorway, moving toward her. He stopped when the light found her curled in the corner chair with a book pressed against her chest. The generator will take 10 minutes, he said. I know, she said. I'm fine. He looked at her. She looked at him. The flashlight lit him from below and turned him into something softer than he ever looked in daylight, the hard line of his jaw, the dark of his eyes, the way he was just standing there looking at her like he wasn't entirely sure what to do next. You can go, she said. I'm not afraid of the dark. He crossed the library and sat down in the chair opposite her instead. She opened her mouth. Closed it. They sat in the dark with the storm raging against the glass and neither of them spoke for a long time and it was the most intimate thing Laurat had experienced in years, which was absolutely terrifying. My father used to lock me in dark rooms, he said. She went very still. When I was a boy, he continued. His voice was flat. Factual. Like he was reading it from someone else's file. It was his version of discipline. He believed discomfort built character. A pause. He was not wrong about the character part. I'm sorry, she said softly. He shrugged. The flashlight was on the table between them and it lit the underside of his face in gold. I am not telling you for sympathy. I am telling you because you are sitting in the dark looking like you are not fine and telling me you are fine, and I recognize that particular kind of performance. You are alone a lot, he said. I know what that looks like on a person. So are you, she said. Something moved across his face. Quick and gone, like a bird across a window. But she saw it. The generator kicked on. The lights came back warm and low. The storm continued outside, wild and indifferent, and Tae-yoon stood up and retrieved his flashlight and looked at her one more time, that long, direct look that she had no name for, and left the library. Laurat sat very still for a long time after. Then she pressed her hand flat against her sternum and felt her own heartbeat and had a very serious conversation with herself that went nowhere useful. Besties, if this story has you gripping something, please share it right now. Send it to a friend who needs a story that hits different. And if you're not subscribed, do it before this episode ends, because what's coming next will break you wide open. The morning after the storm, she found a single yellow tulip on the kitchen counter. No note. No explanation. Just a yellow tulip in a small glass of water, sitting exactly where she always set her morning coffee cup. She stood and looked at it for a very long time. Then she moved it 6 inches to the left, out of the way, and made her coffee, and said absolutely nothing to anyone about it, and felt it burning a hole in her peripheral vision for the rest of the day. He came home that evening and glanced at the tulip, still there, still in its small glass, and said nothing. Made himself a drink. Sat at the counter while she cooked. Said, "How was your day?" Like it was the most normal thing in the world, like they were something they absolutely were not. "Quiet," she said. "Good quiet or bad quiet?" She turned to look at him. He was watching her with his drink halfway to his mouth, genuinely waiting for her answer. "Good quiet," she said. He nodded. He drank. She turned back to the stove and thought, "I am in so much trouble." A week passed. Then another. The tulips kept appearing, one every few mornings, different colors, no notes. She never mentioned them. He never mentioned them. They existed in the penthouse like a secret language neither of them was willing to translate out loud. He started eating dinner at the table instead of his office. She started setting 1 plate, then 2, without being asked. The first night she set 2, he paused at the kitchen doorway and looked at the table and then at her. "Sit," she said, before she could stop herself. He Saturday. They ate in almost silence, but it was the comfortable kind, the kind that didn't need to be filled. He asked her once about her family, and she told him about her mother in Lagos and her grandmother's 8 children and the market on Sunday mornings that smelled like pepper soup and rain. He listened with the complete attention of a man who had never once been distracted by anything he deemed unimportant, and in that moment she understood that she was not unimportant to him, which was a realization she immediately tried to put back in its box. He told her, in return, that he had not been back to his family's estate in 3 years. That his father was dead and his mother was remarried and that the Choi name now belonged to him, the weight of it, the blood on it, all of it. He said it the way people talk about weather. Laurat looked at him across the dinner table and thought about the boy locked in dark rooms, and felt something ache behind her ribs that she had absolutely no right to feel. The box was not big enough. Everything was spilling out of it. The night things shifted, it started with an argument. One of his men, a thick-necked enforcer named Ryu who had never once acknowledged Laurat as anything other than background, had left his jacket on the kitchen counter and spoken to her in a tone that made her put down the pot she was holding very carefully. "Warm this up," he said, pushing his coffee mug toward her. Not asking. Pushing. "I'm cooking," she said pleasantly. "There's a microwave behind you." Ryu's eyes went flat. "I know who you are in this house," he said quietly. "Don't forget who you are in this house." "I know exactly who I am," she said. He stepped closer. Not threatening, exactly. Just close enough to remind her of the difference in their sizes. "Do you?" "Ryu." Tae-yoon's voice came from the doorway. Laurat had not heard him come in. By the stillness of Ryu's face, neither had he. Tae-yoon walked into the kitchen at the pace of a man with nowhere urgent to be and stood between Laurat and Ryu with his hands in his pockets and looked at his enforcer with an expression that was completely, utterly calm. "Warm your own coffee," he said. "And then explain to me why you are standing that close to someone in my home." Ryu's jaw worked. "Sir, I was just. I didn't ask what you were doing. I asked you to explain it." The pause was precise and devastating. "Take your time." Ryu left the kitchen without his coffee. Laurat stood very still with her pot still in her hand. Tae-yoon turned to look at her. He scanned her face the way he always did, quick, thorough, missing nothing. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "He will be reassigned tomorrow." "You don't have to." "Laurat." He said her name the way he always said it now, not a command, not a reprimand. Just her name, with all of its syllables given equal weight, like it was worth slowing down for. "I do not make statements I don't intend." She looked at him. He looked at her. The distance between them was the length of a kitchen counter and approximately 3,000 unspoken things. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once. He poured himself a glass of water. He leaned against the counter opposite her and watched her cook for 20 minutes, and neither of them said another word, and it was the most clarifying 20 minutes of her entire life. She was in love with him. She was absolutely, disastrously, completely in love with Choi Tae-yoon, and there was nothing to be done about it except keep her face neutral and her hands busy and her heart somewhere it couldn't be examined. Besties, are you breathing? Because we need to know. Drop a heart in the comments if Tae-yoon just became your favorite person on the internet. And please, share this story right now. Someone in your life needs Tae-yoon energy today. She had precisely 4 days of this quiet, devastating clarity before everything collapsed. The woman arrived on a Tuesday. She came the way powerful women always came, announced by her own presence before she was announced by anything else. The elevator opened and she walked out like she owned the floor, which she might have, technically, depending on whose legal team you consulted. She was Korean and flawlessly beautiful and wearing a coat that cost more than Laurat's entire year of salary, and she walked into the penthouse like someone returning to a place they'd never left. Her name, Laurat would learn later from Minute Jun's pinched expression, was Han Soo-yeon, Tae-yoon's betrothed. Laurat was polishing the glass coffee table when Soo-yeon walked in, and she kept polishing it because what else was she going to do, stop existing? Soo-yeon's eyes moved over her once, the kind of assessment that took 2 seconds and concluded everything, and then dismissed her entirely. Where is Tae-yoon? Soo-yeon asked, not to Laurat but to the room. In his office, Laurat said, because she was staff and answering questions was part of her job and she would not shrink, not for anyone. Soo-yeon looked at her again. Longer this time. And you are? Laurat. I manage the household. A smile moved across Soo-yeon's mouth that did not come within a mile of her eyes. How sweet, she said, and walked toward the office without another word. Laurat kept polishing. Her hands were completely steady. She was very proud of her hands. From behind the closed office door she heard voices, Tae-yoon's low and controlled, Soo-yeon's higher and carrying the particular music of a woman making a point she had been saving up. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. When Soo-yeon emerged, her coat was still perfect and her expression had the carved quality of a woman who had won by a margin she found unsatisfying. She stopped in front of Laurat on her way to the elevator. He needs you to prepare the guest suite, she said. I'll be staying for the week. Laurat looked up from the coffee table. He needs to tell me that himself, she said pleasantly. Something flickered in Soo-yeon's eyes. Quick and cold. Excuse me? Mr. Choi manages the household instructions directly. I'll check with him. The elevator opened behind Soo-yeon as if on cue. She smiled, that same smile that lived nowhere near her face, and stepped in. Of course, she said. I'll tell him you're thorough. He appreciates that in staff. The doors closed. Laurat stood in the empty penthouse and breathed. 2 minutes later, Tae-yoon appeared in the office doorway. He looked at her. She looked at him. You don't have to prepare the guest suite, he said. She said. I know what she said. He walked toward the kitchen and she followed because she didn't know what else to do. He poured 2 glasses of water and pushed one across the counter toward her, which he had started doing sometimes, like it was normal, like they shared water like people who shared things. She is my father's arrangement, he said. Not an explanation, exactly. More like a piece of information he had decided she was entitled to. Not mine. Laurat looked at her water glass. It's not my business, Mr. Choi. Tae-yoon. She looked up. Call me Tae-yoon, he said quietly. We eat dinner together. You know about my father. Call me by my name. The kitchen was very quiet. Seoul hummed 4 to 7 floors below. It's still not my business, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. No, he agreed. It's not. He picked up his water. He walked toward the corridor. He stopped at the doorway. I am not going to marry her, Laurat. He left. She stood alone in the kitchen with her glass of water and her completely traitorous heart slamming against her ribs and thought, this man is going to ruin me. Soo-yeon came back the next day. And the day after that. She came the way territorial women come, with gifts for Tae-yoon and comments for Laurat that sounded like compliments and landed like needles. Your braids are interesting. Did you make this? How domestic. You must keep him very comfortable. Always with that smile, that carved, beautiful, perfectly aimed smile. Laurat smiled back every time and said nothing that could be quoted. But she saw the way Soo-yeon watched her when Tae-yoon wasn't looking. She saw the calculation. She saw the woman cataloguing her, measuring the distance between them, deciding what kind of threat she was. She was right to measure. 3 days into Soo-yeon's visits, Laurat came home from the market to find Suan in the kitchen. In the kitchen. Standing exactly where Laurat stood, in the space that had become, without anyone deciding it, hers, in a silk blouse with her hair loose and a glass of wine in her hand, talking to Tae-yoon who was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, looking at a woman he was supposed to marry and feeling, clearly, nothing. Laurat set her grocery bags down at the entrance. Suan looked up. "Oh, you're back," she said, light and easy, like Laurat had stepped into Suan's kitchen instead of the other way around. "We were just talking about redecorating. I think this space needs more intention." "The space is functional," Tae-yoon said. "It's a billionaire's penthouse, darling. It should be more than functional." The word darling landed in the kitchen like something thrown. Laurat picked up her grocery bags. "I'll put these away," she said. "Actually," Tae-yoon straightened. "Laurat." She looked at him. Something careful was happening in his face. "Leave them. Take the afternoon." "I have." "Take the afternoon," he said again. She left. She went to her room and sat on her expensive mattress that he had bought her and pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed through something she refused to name. She could hear them, not words, just the presence of two voices in a kitchen that smelled like her cooking. This was his world. She had forgotten that. She had let herself forget what she was in it. A maid with a tulip problem and a heart that had badly miscalculated. If your chest is tight right now, type "I felt that" in the comments. And if you want part 2 immediately after this, you know what to do: subscribe, like, and share this story. We are just getting to the dangerous part, besties. Stay with us. She started drawing lines. She cleaned the penthouse. She cooked the meals. She said Mr. Choi again, which made something flicker in his eyes every time she did it but which she needed for her own sanity. She was polite. She was efficient. She was professional. She was everything she had been for the first 6 months before yellow tulips and dinner tables and conversations in dark libraries had dismantled her carefully constructed distance. He noticed. Of course he noticed. The man noticed everything. He came to the kitchen one evening while she was washing up and said, without preamble, "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" she said. "Performing fine." She kept washing the pot. "I am fine." He was quiet behind her for a moment. "She said something to you, Mr. Choi?" "She says things," he said, "to people she considers a threat. It's how she operates." A pause. "I want to know what she said." "It wasn't anything." She turned around, back against the sink, and looked at him directly because she was done being small in this kitchen. "She didn't say anything that wasn't true. She is going to be your wife. This," she gestured at the space between them, "whatever this has become, is not appropriate, and I think we both know that. So I'm adjusting. That is what professional people do." He looked at her for a long time. His face was doing that complicated thing it did when he was feeling something he didn't have language for. "I told you," he said quietly. "I am not going to marry her. And I told you it's not my business." She turned back to the sink. "Good night, Mr. Choi." He didn't move for a long moment. Then he left. She pressed her forehead against the cabinet above the sink and closed her eyes and told herself she had done the right thing. The necessary thing. The only thing that kept her whole. She almost believed it. The call came 4 days later. Laurat was on her way back from a dry cleaning errand, one of the peripheral tasks that took her out of the penthouse occasionally, into the city, into fresh air that wasn't 4 to 7 floors above consequence. She was crossing Qingdam Street with her phone in her hand, listening to Amora tell her to quit the job for the 7th time, when the car appeared. She saw it before she felt it, a black car, moving too fast, aimed with the particular precision of something that was not an accident. The thought crossed her mind in exactly that much time, not an accident. And then there was nothing. You need to breathe. We know. Take a second. And while you're at it, kindly hit the subscribe button. The call reached Tae-yoon in the middle of a board meeting he had already been barely present in. Minute-jun slipped through the door with a face that Tae-yoon had learned, over 12 years, meant something that changed things. He read Minute-jun's expression and stood up from the table before the man had said a single word. "Sir. Where is she?" Minute-jun told him. What happened to Choi Tae-yoon's face in that moment was something the 12 people in that boardroom would describe differently to different people for years afterward. Some said he went pale. Some said he went still in the way that things go still right before they shatter. One person said his eyes changed, that something that had always been cold in them simply ceased to be cold. He was out of the building in 4 to 5 seconds. He drove himself, which he had not done in 6 years, and ran every red light between Mapo-gu and Qingdam-gu and spoke to no one and said nothing and gripped the wheel with both hands white-knuckled all the way to the hospital. She was in surgery when he arrived. The doctor spoke to him in the corridor: internal bleeding, head trauma, induced coma for stabilization. The words came at him like objects thrown in the dark. He stood and absorbed them one by one and did not sit when they offered him a chair. She would live, they said. They believed she would live. The next 72 hours were critical. The coma was a precaution, medically necessary, her body needed to. Who is responsible for her care? He asked. Are you family? I am responsible for her care, he said. Whatever she needs. Whatever it costs. I need a list. The doctor produced a list. He read it. He signed everything. He transferred the funds and the time it took the administrator to find the right form. Then he sat down. In a plastic chair outside her room, in a hospital corridor that smelled like antiseptic and fluorescent light, Choi Tae-yoon, who ran Seoul's most powerful criminal syndicate, who had never in his adult life sat still for anything, sat down and did not move. Minute Jun arrived 20 minutes later. He stood beside his employer and waited. Pull the footage from Qingdam Street, Tae-yoon said. His voice was very quiet. Every camera. Every angle. I want to know the plate, the driver, and who gave the order. Yes, sir. And Minute Jun. Sir. Tell the team to prepare. We are not managing this quietly. Minute Jun understood what that meant. Yes, sir. He left. Tae-yoon sat alone in the plastic chair and looked at the closed door of her room and felt something he had no name for build in his chest, dense and hot and entirely without ceiling. He thought about tulips. He thought about dark libraries and storms. He thought about the way she said his name when she forgot to be careful. He thought about her laughing in his penthouse when she thought no one could hear her, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere real, the kind he had never managed himself. He thought about the boy locked in dark rooms and the man he had become in those rooms, and whether that man deserved to sit outside her door. He stayed anyway. 72 hours later, the footage gave him a plate. The plate gave him a driver. The driver, after a conversation that took 11 minutes and occurred in a location that would never appear in any official record, gave him a name. Han Soo-yeon. Tae-yoon sat with that name in his hands for a long time. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and went back to his plastic chair outside Laurat's room, and the look on his face as he passed his men in the corridor was the kind of look that made grown men with guns step aside without being asked. He would handle Soo-yeon. But first, he needed Laurat to open her eyes. He needed her to come back. He sat at her bedside in a chair he had insisted on replacing when the nurses' backs were turned, something padded, something that didn't punish the body for the act of waiting, and he held her hand and told Seoul's most feared mafia boss's version of a prayer over her, which looked like silence and felt like everything. Come back, he said once, very quietly, to her still face, her closed eyes, the breathless quiet of her. The machines continued their steady rhythm. The city continued 4 to 7 floors below. And Choi Tae-yoon, who had never in his life asked anything of anyone without being prepared to take it, sat and waited and for the first time understood what it meant to have something to lose. Besties. If this broke your heart, you are not alone. We are all in that hospital corridor with him. But here is what Tae-yoon did not know yet. He did not know that across the city, Han Soo-yeon was making phone calls. He did not know that she had already spoken to her family and his mother. He did not know that she was arranging a dinner, a gathering she was calling a resolution, a fresh start, a coming together of both families after what she was describing as a terrible accident, scheduled for the evening that the doctors had told her, through sources she should not have had, was the earliest Laurat could have been expected to wake. Soo-yeon had done her math. She had arranged the flowers and the table settings and sent out invitations to a dinner designed to seal a future she was determined to secure. In a world where Laurat did not wake up, did not return, did not exist in Tae-yoon's life as anything other than a sad footnote. She had almost gotten away with it. Almost. Laurat's eyes opened on the 61st day. Besties, that was not an accident and you know it. She is awake. He has been sitting in that chair. And Soo-yeon has already set the table. Part 2 is coming and it will destroy you beautifully. Subscribe right now so you do not miss it. Like this video, share it with every person you know who deserves a story this powerful, and drop "She's awake" in the comments if you felt that last line in your soul. We will see you in part 2. Stories behind the billions. Because the best love stories always cost something first.